always as a normal, the very well-known crime with which the government accuses us is we are terrorists, actually. As you know, in this country, whoever asks or demands about his rights will be labeled as a terrorist, and therefore I was accused of terrorism.
The Ethiopian government has imposed a 6-month state of emergency. Critics, like the leader of the Oromo ethnic group, say it amounts to a civil war and that it's a case of the powerful minority oppressing the majority. Parliament is led by the ruling Tigrayan people, who make up just 6% of the population. They say the emergency measures are needed to protect ethnic groups from being attacked. But those same groups say the decision is really a ploy to send the military into their neighborhoods to quell years of pro-democracy protests. So far, the rallies have led to the Prime Minister's resignation and the release of thousands of prisoners. Well, we invited representatives from the Ethiopian government onto the program, but they were unavailable. I'll give you a little bit of what they said in a few moments, but for now, I'm joined from Washington by Abebe Gellaw. He's an Ethiopian journalist in exile and the CEO of Ethiopian Satellite TV and Radio. Thanks for joining us, sir. Let me ask you, in a nutshell.
Thanks for having me.
The government says the state of emergency is justified. Yeah. I'm assuming you disagree with that. Tell me why you don't think it's justified.
I completely disagree because basically people are demanding for greater freedom. There is no freedom in Ethiopia. As you know, there is no basic human rights. The minority Tigrayan People's Liberation Front dominates the political, economic, military and security apparatus. So people are not happy in Ethiopia. What the government is saying that by imposing a state of emergency, it can stabilize the country, but this would definitely have the reverse effect, because this is the second time that the Ethiopian government has imposed a state of emergency. The first one was imposed in October 2016, from October 2016 to August 2017. It didn't work. The only thing that they did was they arrested so many people. There was mass incarceration. So many journalists were jailed. Opposition party leaders were also arrested in mass. So it didn't work. But people were not even intimidated during the first round of state of emergency. The second round, this one, came as a surprise after the Prime Minister resigned. The government had promised that it was undertaking reform, but it seems to be a reverse from what they promised initially, which is opening up the political space.
Okay, let's listen to what they had to say to us. Now, as I say, we invited them onto the program. They declined. We got hold of the embassy in the UK. This is what they told us. They said the state of emergency was declared to protect the constitution and constitutional order, as well as ensure the security and stability of the country and ensure freedom of movement and the rights of citizens to live wherever they choose and to build assets. The government of Ethiopia remains committed to ensuring all fundamental human rights are observed as stipulated in Ethiopia's constitution. So, Abebe, they're saying you have a constitution, they're abiding by it, they're protecting everybody's rights. Why don't you believe them?
Well, there is definitely a constitution on paper. They have been violating this constitution since it came into force in '94. What they are trying to say is that, they are trying to restore a constitutional order, but there was no constitutional order in the first place. Like I said, the constitution has never been implemented. Basic human rights have been grossly violated in Ethiopia. The government is terrorizing its own people. So many people, like I mentioned earlier, have been in jail. Some of them have been released, quite obviously. But what they're saying is, totally false. In fact, what's happening in Ethiopia is the fact that the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which is a minority ruling elite, is trying to impose its will on the government, which it seems to be losing control in the last few months. That's exactly what's happening.
And do you believe that the Oromo people and the Amhara people, if we put them together, they form, I guess, the majority of the country? Do you believe that they are under the heel of the Tigrayan people?
I do not believe that that's the case. Both Oromos and Amaras have been demanding for greater rights. They would like to have a fair share in the country. Nobody wants to dominate others except the TPLF, which has been dominating Ethiopia for the last 27 years. What we need in Ethiopia currently is reform, not restrictions, as even the Americans have said. The US government, as you may well know, have rejected this state of emergency. The European Union has also rejected it. So many countries have been voicing their concern on the reimposition of this state of emergency because people are demanding for their freedom. You have to give them instead of curtailing freedom, imposing this draconian law and state of emergency, which is, in other words, military rule without the constitution. This state of emergency basically suspended the constitution because the constitution guarantees at least basic human rights. According to the new state of emergency, nobody has a right to free expression, freedom of assembly. You cannot express your concerns or air your grievances. So I really don't know which constitution they are talking about.
Do you think the Prime Minister was forced out?
Definitely, he was forced out. We had the information earlier. We were not surprised that he resigned because the TPLF was pressuring him to resign, and they wanted to put in place another of their own stooges. But it seems that that may not be the case because the Oromo People Democratic Organization, which is another ally of the TPLF, and the ANDM, which is the Amhara National Democratic Movement, have been rejecting the domination of the TPLF, even within the ruling party.
Now, you're in exile. What needs to happen for you to go back home? Whether it's in the form of somebody new as a prime minister that you would trust, or some of the measures that might be taken by this government. What do they need to do for you to trust the system enough to say, okay, I'm going to leave Washington, D.C., I'm going to get on a plane, I'm going to go back to Ethiopia, I'm going to be a part of my country again?
People like me are not just demanding change in the faces of the prime minister, That will never fundamentally change the basic problems. We need to have a guarantee for basic human rights in Ethiopia. People have to be able to freely express themselves. They have to freely organize. They have to protest if they want to, or if they have any grievances. So if the government respects its own constitution, that would be the guarantee. But like I said, since the constitution came into force, it has never been respected by the very people who have written it. So the guarantee should be the constitution. If they respect the constitution and people have basic fundamental rights respected, not only me, but so many Ethiopians in the diaspora can go back and rebuild their country. But this doesn't seem to be happening right now, despite the fact that the government is promising reform. We have never seen reform so far, except the release of some prominent political journalists, political prisoners.
Abebe Gellaw, I thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers.